So, welcome to another episode of Live Better Connected, by podcast brought to you by Mobile UK. And today I am very excited to be introducing Gráinne Gilmore, Director of Research and Insights at Cluttons. Welcome, Gráinne.
Hi there, how are you?
So before we do kick off, can you, what is Cluttons?
Cluttons is a real assets advisory firm. So we cover all aspects of property, so commercial, residential, infrastructure, and especially digital connectivity. So that's mobile and fibre.
And you have a particular role in insights in the industry, and we've seen many really fascinating reports come from you guys. And today we're going to talk about one in particular, which I have to say I have here, and we'll obviously have the link to this in the description. It's called Connecting Today and for Tomorrow. But it asks, are we there yet? And it talks about future-proofing the UK's digital connectivity infrastructure. And as I say, I found this really interesting report, and we're going to go through it today. But what underpins this is it actually asks our legislators, our MPs, what are their thoughts about this topic? And in many ways, are they thinking about it in the right way? And what are they doing about it? So before we just jump into it, do you want us to say a little bit about the report?
Absolutely. So we've been doing annual research reports around these issues on digital connectivity for 5 years. This is the 5th annual report, and it's the second time we've gone out and spoken to MPs. And we feel that it is an important voice to reflect back to Parliament and back to the industry to give us some insight on what our policymakers are thinking about digital connectivity. Some of the results, as you say, are very interesting, and I hope we get to discuss that more. But we thought it's an important voice to bring out. Some of them might be sitting in positions where they can have an influence. Some of them will be sitting on the back benches, but they will be listening to their constituencies, and we also reflect that within the report.
I think what we reflect in the report is that this is an issue that they hear from their constituents, and we'll get into that. But what we also get to, and we'll come to, is you've come with some recommendations at the end. And I think some of those, certainly from an industry perspective, speaking from the mobile sector, we certainly do align with. So delving into this report, the first instance is it takes a look at where we are. What's the picture of mobile connectivity at the moment?
So the first thing we do is put it on a global context to really give people an indication of where we're sitting. And the reason we do think this is important is because when companies are deciding where to invest around the world, and increasingly every sort of company is going to rely on digital connectivity as well as transport connectivity and other kind of skilled workforces, things that would make their investment decisions real for them. But digital connectivity is right up there. And where we stand at the moment in terms of mobile data downloads, the latest speed test kind of connections across the world show that we're out of the top 50 when it comes to the speed of how quickly we download data on our mobiles. Now, it still works. We all know that it functions in the UK, but we've got countries across the world who adopted 5G much earlier than us. As we know, as soon as you're onto 5G, you've got way more capacity. Things move much quicker. So you have got countries in Europe and in the Middle East and over in Australasia, which are much faster in terms of connectivity than we are here in the UK. So it gives us something to aim for. In terms of the UK itself, the government has set targets for where it wants to be in terms of how 5G is rolled out across the country. And their latest target, which Ofcom measures, is that standalone 5G target. And it just feels like we're some way off that. The latest Ofcom report says that about 15% of mobile sites are currently standalone 5G. And that's a lot of work to do between now and 2030, especially with the hurdles and the challenges that are currently in place, which is slowing down some of that work. So that's where we go on to then to investigate what those are and how we might overcome them.
But you also, one of the key things I think that comes quite strongly through in this report is why does it matter? I think you bring up in here that the government's own infrastructure strategy says that digital infrastructure supports productivity, growth through lowering costs for firms, underpinning technical change, widening access to labour markets across the country, and enabling new and innovative services to be provided. Why is it so important?
Well, I think that encapsulates it, but also I think it was really heartening that was spelled out in the infrastructure strategy, because really it was the first time that we saw it written down from the government, that there was an understanding of the importance of digital connectivity. We got a lot about data centers before, we got a lot about maybe digital first, but it was very much thinking about how the government could perform better. It's all part of the bigger picture and it's all important, but we didn't get that real kind of acknowledgement that this is important for now and for future. And the other thing that I really liked what it said was it's important for society, it's important for government functioning, it underpins everything. So I think that kind of sea change and that real public recognition that digital connectivity is no longer something we can just think about and take for granted that it's happening in the background. They've brought it to the fore. That gives a platform now for us to say, yeah, so can we now deal with some of the challenges that are slowing down? Because we've got maybe good enough now in terms of digital connectivity. We're able to have this conversation. People are able to listen to it. That's great, but it's not as good in some places as others. It's it needs to be improved and it needs to be future proofed, because we are now moving into an era where we will be using so much more data than ever before.
And you mentioned that it's an underpinning technology, and I thought one stat that really jumped out was it said that 1 hour of internet downtime can cost a business up to £220,000 an hour. And BT equally had a stat in there that said that the delay in rolling out the current technology that's going, the 5G standalone, is costing the economy around 230 billion. So this is critical, and we've got to get this right.
Can I just come back to you on that 220,000, because I think that's the average. That data was shared with us by Wired Score, and they go around and score buildings on the connectivity, because it's so much more important now for investors to make sure that they're going to have the best connectivity to when they sell.
Well, you don't invest in a building if it's not connected.
Exactly. Or if you do, you're trying to upgrade it as quickly as you can because the business is operating out of there, need it. That was an average figure, because I think it runs from the very smallest operators, and that, it's very expensive if people can't get on their work mobile to do a bit of work, just day to day. But you think about those massive retailers, and you think about it's a slightly different kind of example, but Jaguar Land Rover had a massive cybersecurity attack that really brought down all their systems. Now, this isn't lack of connectivity. This was something else and a bad actor, and that's awful. But it actually affected the GDP figures that just came out a couple of days ago. The impact was so large. But if that was because of, another reason that the connectivity went down, or if the systems weren't able to cope and you weren't able to get the connectivity you needed, the expense is just inordinate. You look at M&S and the impact that it's had because it wasn't able to sell online. So I think it's really trying to draw those two narratives together, which is we need to make sure that the connectivity is there. So this is not going to be an issue for our retailers, for our producers, for our manufacturers as we move into the future, when all of their automated systems are more and more reliant on the connectivity in the first place.
Exactly. And I mean, looking at MPs, and I think in this you said that 90% of MPs surveyed agree that good connectivity is critical for UK competitiveness. So that's a great start. But when we looked and delved into it you looked and delved into it a little more, it didn't. There was some disconnect. I mean, I think again you said that 60% of MPs understood the relationship between connectivity and infrastructure. But explain a bit more, because it didn't seem to match up always.
Yes. So we asked the question of those MPs, do you think you understand the connection between, sorry, forgive the pun, the connection between good connectivity and the infrastructure to provide it? And they said, 2/3 of them said, yeah, I understand that. I understand that you need masts and cables in order to have good connectivity. But when we said, well, do the residents and the constituents that you operate with, do you think they understand that connection? Only 1/3 of them said that they thought that they did. So this comes to our first kind of call out in the report, if you like. We do feel there is a need for an information campaign. We would love it to be backed and funded by the government, but really drawing together those two things. So that people aren't looking in isolation at a phone mast and then at their phone when it's not working, or their laptop when they can't connect remotely. They can see that there is a connection between the two things, because that kind of greater understanding that we need this infrastructure in order to provide that connectivity that you currently have, that you need, that you want, and that you will want more in the future as more things become more connected. Just drawing that connection together would be really, really valuable. So that's one of the things we're calling for.
what I thought was slightly concerning was the confidence of those MPs in achieving, the targets that have been set. You mentioned the targets earlier, and equally the government in that industrial strategy that we mentioned said digital infrastructure increasingly underpins the provisions of services critical for the functioning of society. You said business and government, and the government is committed to facilitating the development and expansion of cutting-edge, secure and sustainable digital infrastructure that meets the needs of both the public and private sectors. But how confident were MPs in achieving those targets?
Yeah, only around a third of MPs thought that we would achieve that standalone 5G target by 2030. So, there's a realization there that there's a challenge. And to be honest, that I suppose that gives us something to work from, which is there is a challenge here. So how can we start to address that challenge? And so that's why we think the information campaign is one way to start. But another thing that we're talking about is turning those words into action. So you're quite rightly bringing up the industrial strategy, the infrastructure strategy, and we need to turn the words that we have on the page there into actions now, and the government have a lot on their plate at the moment. We get that, but it's kind of laid out. The plan is laid out, and there's lots of promises, and there's various things, little bits of legislation that they could push on through now, and we'd just love that to happen quite quickly.
And I think that's key. You've got MPs who are saying they're not confident they're going to meet these. They're looking for information campaigns to help them with their residents, but equally to push the benefits of this across society. But they are the ones in the positions to do this. So I suppose, what can they do? Because, I think from our point of view as the industry, we've laid out quite a few areas where we think, and I think we'll come into some of those that you've equally put. But for instance, you mentioned the information campaign. It says 60% say launching a government-led campaign on the benefits of digital connectivity is important. Why aren't we seeing a campaign?
Because I think some of the MPs we talk to might be on the backbenchers, but we're hoping that they would be influencing ministers. But we also hope that by publishing this data, by publishing this research, it may pass in front of the eyes of some of the people who are more in those decision-making positions within government if they haven't taken part in the survey themselves.
Well, just to come on to that, Grania, sorry. Again, another stat that jumped out at me trying to get, I think it was looked at planning. Planning is a very, very key issue for the industry. Yet 71% agreed that a more supportive planning system is essential. But the planning and infrastructure bill that's currently going through Parliament doesn't mention digital infrastructure.
This is where some of the gaps are. And so that, again, is why you need an information campaign, and then you need kind of this words into action thing. But what I think policymakers might suggest is that some of the plans in the planning bill, which talks about how things progress through planning at local authority level and the different routes by which they might go through planning, might benefit all sectors, house building, digital infrastructure, everything. So I think we have to wait to see how that develops and how it comes through. But again, speed would be of the essence here. So again, government's very busy at the moment, but it would be nice to see that progress and develop quite quickly. We saw the outlines in the potential outlines in this planning bill and the new NPPF, but we would like to see it progress now with some speed, because it might really evolve how planning works at the moment and streamline that process in many areas.
And I think, to be fair to government, we are expecting a call for evidence on planning, specifically looking at the telecommunications sector. So we are looking and hoping that is coming, and we're confident that it will. But I think your information point is really interesting because, again, as you mentioned, it's not just MPs or residents; it's equally planners, and having the right skills and understanding to do this. And I think one of the things you put forward here is placemakers. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Absolutely. So we would really like there to be a digital placemaker in each local authority or even across a group of local authorities. Now, in Wales, they have two types of digital placemakers. They have a placemaker that focuses on inclusion, which is so important. And they also have a digital placemaker that is on a strategic level. We're really talking about that strategic role, which we hope that inclusion would definitely feed into, because it is, as I said, just totally crucial. But the strategic role plays...
Well, to have digital inclusion, you need connectivity.
Exactly. But the strategic role plays a different part. And we spoke to John Duncan as part of the report, and he's at the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. And he explained to us that it's not just dealing with stakeholders externally. They also do a lot of work internally, and they've had great contributions and conferences with their own planning teams to help them give them more information, all the information they need about how operators work, how digital connectivity works, to really inform the planners so they can go back. And it's something that the planners have asked for. So there's real collaboration, and hopefully that has helped speed things up in those local authorities. And I think if that could be replicated, I don't know if you agree, Gareth, but if that could be replicated, that could be really valuable across the country.
We certainly agree. I mean, we're very supportive of what we've called digital champions, digital placemakers. I think, it's understanding what that role is. And you're rightly pointing out there are, different ways of looking at this. But I think, it's that building about, in many ways, one, information, but building a rapport with the industry, giving us a point of contact. Because often, when we go to local authorities, we don't know who we need to speak to. And equally, they don't necessarily know who to speak to us. And it's having someone with the skills and understanding. We are a complex industry, and there's a lot of multifaceted things that happen and are needed. And that can often be overwhelming, especially when you're under-resourced. And that is a key part of the planning system at the moment. So part and parcel of the planning reform that we're looking for will enable local authorities to manage this more efficiently and quickly, and equally take some of it out of their hands. So therefore, it is more cheaper and cost effective, on both sides. And I think, this is, it is a huge burden for local authorities. And we want to assist them. And I think it's building it in that collegiate manner, which can help go forward. Yeah, I think you had a statistic in there that said where there are digital champions, they're 4 times more likely to support infrastructure deployment. And you're going back to the sort of national side of things, the national planning framework. It's potentially also looking at having the weighting where there's more understanding that this is critical national infrastructure, and that it is. I think moving towards a position where, is it just because I don't like the look of it, or actually do we need it? And obviously we need to work within planning and planning law to ensure that this infrastructure fits in with our localities. But equally, we need to understand that essential need that we have for things like GP consultations and online learning, or even, emergency networks having access to mobile.
I agree with you. And just on that critical infrastructure, we just found it so interesting that the NHS app has been called now critical national infrastructure, which is fantastic. But you can see the direction of travel. But I think you and I would know that without connectivity, the app will not be effective and will not be able to work. So it's just remembering things like that. So when there are planning decisions being made, this is connections that will power this form of critical national infrastructure. But yes, I agree with you. I think any sort of infrastructure for connectivity should be critical in itself.
Well, as you say, the direction is going in that way. It is, your council tax, your bin collection, all of that is now being made available online. And equally, councils are working to a digital first strategy. So, it's all very well to be digitally transformed, but again, joining those dots and making sure that infrastructure is in place to enable that, I think, is key.
I don't know how you feel about this, Gareth, but do you feel that mayors in England will have more of an impact as devolution continues? I know it's different in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, but in England we have devolution happening. So we have mayors in some areas, and there's more mayors coming in the coming years. And we talk about local authorities a lot, but do you think there's more room for that regional strategy? We certainly think so. We think kind of that return, if you look at it at a house building point of view, people are returning to that kind of regional spatial strategy approach. And there's an opportunity there, especially when we think about placemaking, digital placemakers, just like they have at the GMCA. You kind of lead from the top at that mayoral level.
Yeah, we are certainly very interested in that. I mean, from a point of view of the strategic oversight of this, while we are a national critical network, we are installed at a very localized case-by-case basis, and having that strategic look over, wider areas, and as you say, mayoral city deals, combined authority areas, I think is very important. It's not a network that is built just in one street. It's a network that links into a national network that, as you say, is critical to not only that locality, but us as a nation as well, and us being connected and being world class and competitive on that global scale. and therefore being able to draw in the investment and growth that the government is seeking, and goes back to why this is such an underpinning technology to do everything that goes through. I mean, this report has come out, and just to mention, your sort of three key asks, which I think we've gone through, but a national information campaign, which is clear, an acceleration in planning changes, again very much supportive of that, and the appointment of digital placemakers. I think you then, your final point is words need to be turned into action. Could you explain how to do this, and how does this go in looking forward?
Absolutely. So we were talking about all the strategies we've seen come out and some of the planning bills, and we're just thinking it's kind of just applying a bit of urgency to that now. Again, we had a kind of a changeover in some of the ministerial roles just during the course of the year. So I think what we would hope is that there could be a bit of just keep that static now, let people bed into those roles, and then really speed up what's pushing through. I think there is reason for optimism. There's real evidence that some of those key government ministries are really working together on some of these issues, so that it's not so siloed. So, as an industry, we're not having to go to everyone. It feels like they're talking to each other. And now it's just a case of maybe pushing on through and getting some of those changes through. Again, we need to acknowledge, I think, that the government is just really busy at the moment, very conscious that we've got a budget coming up. But if we want to, after that's kind of settled down, then hopefully at the beginning of next year, this could be an area where the government could really take the lead and push on through.
Yeah, and I think that's right. We're seeing this as well. It's a government that wants to listen. It wants to move forward, and we want to work with them. And I think as we go forward, it is working with all MPs across all parties to push this and push it up the agenda, and make it a key priority, which as we've spoken about clearly is here. Well, Grania, I would very much like to thank you for coming on this podcast. It's been a fascinating session. I think these kind of discussions could go on forever. But yeah, wonderful to have you here. And for everyone listening, I think again, please do like and subscribe to this channel and show your appreciation. Obviously, we will be back soon. So great to see you, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.